friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum. And in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about my favorite sci-fi and fantasy protagonists. The main characters that definitely contributed a lot to my enjoyment of their respective books or series, and the ones that have stuck with me in my brain for long periods of time. So I'm not usually much of a character reader. I am typically more of a plot reader, but I can really enjoy a good character as well, especially if they're very emotional or reactive, or you get a good sense of like what they're experiencing. Those are the types of characters that tend to work very well for me. So you'll kind of see that throughout this list for sure. But there are other elements that make me really enjoy a character too. I think some on this list you probably won't be surprised by. There will be some that are typical favorites for many fantasy readers, and then there are others that are maybe a little bit more unique to me and my tastes. And before I get into kind of like my all-time favorites, there is one sort of honorable mention that I want to talk about, and that is Ciri from Warbreaker. And Ciri is one of the sisters in here, and the reason she stands out to me, I mean, I read this back in 2020 and I still vividly remember her, is because she has a lot of traits that sort of align with my personality. And I had never read another character that kind of I saw myself in quite as much as Ciri. So even years later, she does stick with me. Now, I wouldn't say she's one of my like all-time favorites, but she's one of my most memorable. I think some of the traits that kind of stood out to me at the time are that she really cares about the people around her, but she's also sort of like doing her own thing and marching to the beat of her own drum. She's not necessarily always a rule follower. She kind of uses her own logic to dictate what she thinks she should do and shouldn't do. She can be a bit impulsive, but she can also be very thoughtful. And I think a lot of those things kind of describe me if you know me very well. But yeah, so for that reason, I definitely wanted to mention Ciri. Moving into one that is probably pretty popular among many fantasy readers, I want to talk about Locke Lamora from the Gentleman Bastard series, book 1 being The Lies of Locke Lamora. So Locke is a street orphan who is basically sold into a crime organization, I guess, if you will, called the Gentleman Bastards. And they aim to pull off elaborate heists in the aristocratic areas of society. So they're sort of trained in a lot of areas, definitely some street smart type things, but also a lot of the mannerisms and expectations of kind of like upper society. And then this book sort of follows Locke and the other Gentleman Bastards as they attempt to pull off a heist in the present timeline. And then in the past timeline sort of goes with what I was talking about. So some of the reasons that Locke really stands out to me and is very memorable for me are that he is very reactive, but he's not necessarily like off the cuff reactive. Like he will make decisions based on things and he will react, but he also doesn't like give you his initial gut reaction. It's sort of something you unravel over time over the course of the book. And that's not typical of the reactive characters that I really like, but I enjoyed those elements of uncovering his personality, and I also really enjoyed his dynamic with the other Gentleman Bastards, especially Jean, and I hope to continue the series soon, but definitely Locke Lamora belongs on my list of favorites. Another very memorable character that's part of more of a larger cast of a series is Persephone from the Age of Legends series by Michael J. Sullivan. And I'm holding up book 2, Age of Swords, because Age of Myth introduces you to Persephone and her plot, but Age of Swords is really like her book, more or less. Like you really kind of follow along with what she's up to in this one. I attached myself to Persephone right away because she had the most information in her plotline up front through the series. And she is the character who's kind of like going through a lot at the beginning, I think. But there are several elements of her personality that I really enjoyed. So she's kind of thrust into like new territory and new situations in her society. And the way she handles that and reacts to those things are really interesting for sure. She's the kind of person that's like very smart and very intelligent and has the foresight to see things coming, but she's also very calm under pressure, but then also like isn't willing to just sit down and take a back seat in that calmness. She's more like willing to act and do things. And yeah, she's just a very interesting mix of a character, but I definitely enjoyed reading about her through all of her journeys in the series, and definitely she's gonna be one that I remember for a very long time. Next up, I want to move into a fantasy romance protagonist, and that is Oren from the Plated Prisoner series. And Oren is a very interesting character to read about because I mean, you get a sense of this right away from book one, but she's been through some crap. Like, you can tell right away. Like, essentially, this is a loose King Midas reimagining, and Oren is sort of like King Midas's pet. She is kept in this cage. And the twist at the very beginning that you find out is, wait a minute, she likes being in this cage. She feels protected from the world there, and it's kind of her safe place. So throughout the course of the series, a lot goes down, a lot changes, and you get to explore a lot of her backstory and what happened to make her have the thoughts and feelings and sort of ideologies that she has. And you also just get to see her character grow and change quite a bit, and that is a really fun character arc to read. I still have not yet read the final book in the series, but I am dying to. I need to very soon, and I need to know how things end and get some answers. But yeah, Oren is a standout part of why this series is as good as it is for me. Next up, we're going to talk about a Game of Thrones, but unlike most people who would say that Tyrion is their favorite, I'm going to say that Daenerys is the most memorable and my favorite. And yes, Tyrion is entertaining and I do love him too, but Dany's POV is always my favorite in here. I think part of it is that I'm more of a plot reader, and like Tyrion is around some of the other characters where Dany has like her own thing going on throughout the plot of these. But also part of it is just Dany's character. She has a very strong ideology and a moral compass that she wants to follow. But then over the course of the series, she grows to understand so much more. And it's really interesting to see how her ideas are shaped and changed because she starts off so young. But I also just love that she doesn't give up. You know, like a lot of crap happens to her and a lot of people would crumble under the amount of crap that she's had to deal with. But she does not give up. And I think if you have seen all of the show, like her ending in season 8 was the most egregious for me because it really didn't align with what I knew of her character in the books. I mean, I could see a world where like she does change into that type of character, but it would have to be a very nuanced and slow progression, which the show did not handle well at all. I could see a case for that happening in the books, and I wouldn't be too mad as long as, like I said, it's nuanced, explained, and moves slowly. But there's also a lot to love about her character in her current form and her current growth within the novels. And definitely she's one that stuck with me for a while. Speaking of characters with a strong moral compass who have very strong ideologies about what they think is right and what they want to do, we're going to talk about Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files. And the Dresden Files are an urban fantasy series set in Chicago, and Harry Dresden is like a detective but also a wizard. And in the beginning of the series, you see him interact with some police officers where he's helping with some investigations that are a little bit outside the box. It's definitely interesting to see how the supernatural world in this series grows and expands and how you get to understand more and more intricacies through everything through the whole series. But Harry Dresden is one of those characters you just want to root for because he has a moral compass that he is not willing to compromise for any situation. And you can see how he sometimes struggles with that within himself. And it's very interesting to read about. But also, I've followed him for, I don't know, what is it, 18 novels now? So he also stands out in my brain as a character who has just dealt with a lot of different types of situations. And a lot of nuance has kind of been injected into his characterization. I especially also love some of the character work with Harry in the newest novel, Battleground. And that's kind of a hot take because some people do not love where that one goes. But definitely it is memorable for me. And this is a series I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. Next up, I want to talk about Masaki Matsuda from The Sword of Kaigen. And Masaki is a mom who sort of was raised, I guess, in a bit more of a modern tradition, but gave that up to marry and raise a family. And a lot of this book is kind of about the disconnect that she has between her upbringing and her current circumstances, and how she is sort of like fitting into her current circumstances, either well or not well at all. And a lot of this book is her coming to terms with the change within herself, how she has let things happen. And it's just a very emotional read. There are moments in this book that are so cathartic that I was crying because of how cathartic they were. And I read this 5 years ago. I can still vividly remember how I was feeling reading this book. And this is definitely an all-time favorite for a reason. And a lot of that reason is Misaki's character and how she handles everything that is thrown at her in this book. If you haven't yet read this one, I highly recommend you do. I think it is good for many different types of readers, and I think that's part of why it became as popular as it is. It's more of like a medium pacing for fantasy. There's also a good mix between character and plot work. The beginning of this is a bit rough, like the first third. There's a lot of like info dumping, world building, and sort of stuff that eventually plays into the later parts of the character arcs, but that doesn't necessarily feel all that relevant up front when you're reading it. So just hang in there with it. And if you get at least halfway and you're still not invested at all, then like, okay. But like once the action starts in this, after about the first third is kind of where I got invested. And then the last third is kind of what made this as memorable and hard hitting as it was for me. So yeah, definitely recommend it. So moving on to another very strong female main character, we've got to talk about Claire from the Outlander series. And Claire is a character that I think is a very unique reading experience. And I think the reason for that is because of her plot. Essentially, she is in a situation where she is thrust back in time. And she knows things about history, so she has a very good idea about what events are sort of coming. And because she's from a different time, she's kind of like culturally or like personality-wise out of place. And a lot of this series in the character moments with her are about her grappling how she's handling all of that and how she is basically true to herself despite all of that. And that definitely holds a special place in my heart. There are always things that her character does in these novels that make me smile and chuckle. And I also appreciate that she will let you know how she's feeling about something. Speaking of characters that let you know how they're feeling about something, Darrow from the Red Rising series is another one that sticks with me and is a favorite. And this may be a hot take because a lot of people don't necessarily love Darrow's character voice. But for me, he's very memorable because of what he experiences and how he handles those things and how he reacts to those things. I think a lot of people want to be able to root for Darrow throughout this whole series, but for me it's just more interesting to see like more of the nuance of everything his character does and how the ramifications of those things play out. I definitely appreciate that Pierce Brown did not shy away from those sort of aspects in the series, and Iron Gold was actually a more memorable entry for me because of some of those things. I do acknowledge that he can be a bit frustrating to read about because he doesn't necessarily understand that like what he's doing in the moment is maybe not the best. But you as the reader might, and I can see how that was like, okay. And kind of the same vibes as like Poppy War with Rin. Like it's that sort of situation where like you can tell that Rin is doing something that's like going to lead down a path that is like questionable and you just want to shake her. But she's so fascinating to read about. And Darrow is kind of the same category for me. And speaking of, I don't know why I didn't pull out Poppy War to talk about Rin, because these two are sort of like similar feeling, even though they're very different people with different personalities. But I loved the experience of reading about them, and also more like later on in the series, how they have to sort of grapple with everything. Next up, we're going to go back to similar vibes as Loch Lamora with Kylar or Azoth, same person under two names, in the Night Angel series, starting with Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. And he's another street orphan that finds himself sort of as like a guild rat embroiled in some guild politics. And he decides one day he is done with this life. He wants to make things better for himself. So he is going to convince this master assassin in town to apprentice him, and he's going to learn to be an assassin. And definitely the journey he goes on emotionally throughout all of this, and also while sort of having a light come on in his brain about everything that's been going on around him politically that he was unaware of when he was just a street rat, is very entertaining. And I also just love reading about his more emotional side, in that he's doing things that he knows are going to better his circumstances and those of his friends as well. But then he also understands that, like, maybe everything he's doing is not the greatest. So it's a lot of him grappling with that. So even though similar circumstances to Locke Lamora, different sort of personality, but very interesting read that I absolutely love. And the last main character I want to mention in this favorites video is Hadrian Marlowe from the Sun Eater series. Now, I have only yet read the first 3 Sun Eater books, so he is maybe like less high if I were to rank these on my ranking overall than some of these others would be. However, he does stand out to me. He comes from like a well-off, more upper crust family, but he's sort of striking out on his own. And basically the story opens with him telling you he is the Sun Eater, and he's going to recount to you how he got that name. So definitely he has done some things, been through some things, and you get that sense straight off from how that book is introduced. But I like how he handles a lot of the strife and challenges that he's put through in the installments of the series that I have read so far. And it's a good thing I really enjoyed his character, because he really is the focus of that series, at least in the beginning. Like most sci-fi fantasy series have more of a bigger cast of characters. You get a lot of stuff with the side characters. Sun Eater is very, very focused on Hadrian. So I would say that if you are somebody who really wants to hone in on one character and their experience with a story, Sun Eater is a great series for you to try. And it's one that I need to get back to soon, especially now that the final book is going to be coming out later this year, or at least what I think is the final book. Is it actually the final book? Somebody tell me in the comments. So that was it today for some of my favorite SFF protagonists. Let me know down below in the comments if you also love any of these characters, or what some of your favorites are that I didn't mention here today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you want to, and have a great day. Bye!